Imagine a city where luxury was the rule and morality a long-forgotten legend. With a glimmer of gold outshined the darkness of the soul, and every pleasure came at a price. Sodom and Gomorrah were not merely cities, they were realms of such blind prosperity that it became the very seed of their downfall. For a long time, the story of these metropolises, consumed by fire and brimstone, has been told as a simple morality tale. But what if I told you that the true horror lay in a sin so hidden, so intrinsic, that it became an unbearable cry to the heavens? Prepare for a deep analysis that goes beyond the surface, uncovering the layers of iniquity that sealed the fate of these cities. We invite you on a reflective journey, a deep excavation into the true nature of the sin that provoked divine wrath. This is not merely about isolated acts of immorality, but a systemic corrosion of compassion, justice, and love for one's neighbor. We will uncover truths that stretch far beyond common understanding, revealing why God's patience reached its limit. The narrative of an ancient biblical catastrophe echoes with urgency in our times. The ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah are not just reminders of a distant past, but timeless warnings, a crucial lesson about faith, morality, and the inherent justice of a Creator who, though slow to anger, does not ignore wickedness. Let us dive into the Scriptures and uncover what truly led to the most infamous destruction in biblical history. Imagine a land of almost unreal beauty. The plain of the Jordan before the catastrophe was compared to the very garden of the Lord, lush and well-watered, like the fertile land of Egypt. In it, everything flourished. Markets buzzed with gold, silver, and rare spices. Lavish mansions rose high, and extravagant feasts lasted for days. But what danger lies in a land so prosperous without a righteous heart to guide it? Material abundance, when not accompanied by moral values, can become the most treacherous of traps. Genesis 13:13 is unrelenting in its description. The men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. This was not a sudden wickedness, but a gradual degeneration. A society intoxicated by wealth and self-sufficiency began to ignore divine precepts. What does this initial wickedness reveal to us about the slow and painful decay of a civilization? A society that strays from justice and compassion and chooses unrestrained lust as its compass is one step away from destruction, even amidst the greatest prosperity.
Plenty and idleness, instead of inspiring gratitude and generosity, sowed the seeds of arrogance and spiritual indifference. Sodom and Gomorrah became a paradise for the rich and a hell for the poor, who were left to die in the streets. Greed corrupted commerce, justice favored the powerful, and violence spread unchecked. It was a city where women were treated as objects, children sacrificed in dark rituals. They believed themselves untouchable, immune to consequences, but their fate was already sealed. This moral void, this belief in their own invincibility, laid the foundation for an even deeper transgression. This is the first trigger of a hidden truth few dare to reveal, the spiritual blindness born of pride. Night fell upon Sodom. The city, immersed in its routine of debauchery and celebration, was about to have its true nature exposed. The arrival of two angels, divine messengers, at the city gates marked the turning point that would seal Sodom's fate. Lot, the only righteous, though imperfect, man in the chaos, welcomed them into his home. This seemingly ordinary event was the final proof God required. The angels, in their celestial purity, represented the light that would expose the city's deepest darkness. Little did the angels know the horror that awaited. Before they could even rest, Lot's house was surrounded by the men of Sodom. The demand was shocking and explicit. "Bring them out to us, that we may know them." This was not mere curiosity. The word know in the Hebrew context clearly refers to sexual immorality, a depraved desire for collective violence. This is the hidden sin, a depravity that transcends other transgressions, the most vile act of rebellion against divine authority. The city, in its spiritual blindness, not only tolerated perversion, it demanded and celebrated it, even attempting to impose its will upon heaven's messengers. Desperate, Lot tried to protect his guests, even offering his own daughters, a testament to the gravity of the situation and the desperation of a righteous man in the midst of iniquity. But the men of Sodom refused and rushed to break down the door. That's when divine power intervened. The angels struck the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, with blindness. This blindness was not merely physical. It was a powerful metaphor for the inability to see divine truth, a total lack of moral discernment that had overtaken the city. They were blind to righteousness, blind to mercy, and now, literally,
With Sodom's depravity confirmed, the sentence was declared. The angels revealed to Lot, "We will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord." This outcry was not just the scream of suffering victims, but the echo of the city's own iniquity, a deafening voice that had finally reached God's ears. This is the urgency of imminent judgment, a just punishment, but one preceded by mercy still offering a final chance. Lot, despite the coming disaster, desperately tried to save his family. He ran to his sons-in-law, proclaiming, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." The response was devastating in its unbelief, but to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. They laughed, mocked, refused to believe divine truth when it conflicted with the comfort and convenience of their sinful lives. This scene illustrates humanity's resistance to truth, the complacency that precedes the fall, and the fear of loss that blinds the soul to reality. As the sun began to rise, the hour of judgment approached. In an act of divine mercy that contrasts with the mockery of the unbelievers, the angels took him by the hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and brought him out and set him outside the city. It was a rescue mission, an act of love in the face of impending destruction, a final chance granted to those who, though imperfect, still clung to a thread of righteousness. The hand of God, soon to bring fire, first reached out to save. This raises a profound question about divine justice. Salvation was not based on total merit, but on compassion and one last opportunity. The sunrise over the plain of the Jordan, once a promise of a new day, became the prelude to unprecedented annihilation. Genesis 19:24 vividly describes the terror that fell upon the cities. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, from the Lord out of the heavens. This was not a natural disaster, but the manifestation of God's righteous anger, a judgment from above, relentless and unquestionable. Habakkuk's writings remind us that divine wrath, once kindled, does not retreat. The Lord thundered from heaven, the Most High uttered his voice. He sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning and confused them. The devastation was total. Not only were the cities consumed, but all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. The lush plain, once the garden of the Lord, became a wasteland of smoldering ash. The smell of sulfur hung in the air, a grim reminder that divine patience has limits and that extreme disobedience bears overwhelming consequences.
The cities that believed themselves untouchable were reduced to nothing in a single day.
As they fled, God's command was clear. Do not look behind you. But Lot's wife, clinging to her corrupted past, to the life of lust and perversion she left behind, disobeyed. But Lot's wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. This is one of the most shocking and symbolic moments of the narrative. Her tragic fate is a powerful metaphor for the danger of clinging to what is corrupt, for the inability to detach from sin. It's a timeless warning about the consequences of disobedience and the divine authority that cannot be challenged without consequence. Her backward glance sealed not just her physical fate, but her soul, which still belonged to Sodom. After the destruction, Lot and his 2 daughters sought refuge in the small town of Zoar. But fear of the desolation around them drove them to an even more isolated place, a cave in the mountains. Life as they knew it had been annihilated. The prospect of a vanished lineage, an end to the family, led to a desperation that birthed a new and dark sin. Lot's daughters, driven by despair and believing there was not a man on the earth to come into us according to the custom of all the earth, made a shocking decision. They intoxicated their father, and on 2 consecutive nights, lay with him. From this incestuous union were born 2 sons, Moab and Ben-Ammi, the forefathers of the Moabite and Ammonite nations. What was meant as a preservation of lineage became a new cycle of iniquity, perpetuating the sin that had already corrupted Sodom and Gomorrah. This event exposes the dissonance between faith and reason, and the mysterious consequences of sin that echo through generations. The story of Lot and his daughters is a somber reminder of how deeply rooted iniquity can outlive physical destruction and pass into future generations. Moab and Ammon would later become adversaries of Israel, God's chosen people. This legacy of sin, born from despair and lack of faith, shows how wrong choices can leave deep marks, affecting not only individuals but entire civilizations. The fear of negative legacies serves as a trigger for reflection on the impact of our decisions. Before the final destruction, Abraham, the patriarch of faith, interceded for Sodom. In a moving dialogue with God, he asked, "Will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it?" God, in his infinite patience and justice, agreed to spare the city if even 10 righteous were found. Abraham's intercession illustrates the nature of a God who seeks righteousness, who extends mercy even amid the deepest perversion, offering revelation of hidden truths about his divine character.
Centuries later, the prophet Ezekiel, in describing Judah's sin, draws a shocking comparison to Sodom. "Look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy." Here lies the true face of the hidden sin, not just sexual immorality, but pride, self-indulgence, indifference to suffering, and lack of compassion. Sodom is a mirror for modern societies, a timeless warning against prosperity that blinds and the absence of love for others. It is an emotional call to seek meaning and transformation. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not merely a record of judgment, but an invitation to reflection and redemption. It challenges us to look inward, to discern the hidden sins in our own lives and in society. Arrogance, indifference, and the unrestrained pursuit of pleasure and wealth without a moral foundation are traps that still enslave today. May the tragedy of Sodom and Gomorrah inspire us to choose the path of holiness and righteousness, a path that leads to life and salvation. Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed merely for isolated acts of immorality, but for a deep and systemic corruption of heart and soul, manifested in many transgressions. The hidden sin was not only lust, but the complete absence of righteousness.
the pride that made them feel untouchable, the indifference to pain and injustice, unbridled greed, and total lack of compassion. It was a society that turned its back on morality and divine precepts, surrendering to its own perversion. This was the true nature of the iniquity that cried out to the heavens and sealed the city's fate. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a poignant reminder that the bond between humanity and the divine can be broken when transgression becomes the norm, not the exception. It emphasizes that God's patience, though vast, has clear limits. Yet even in judgment, His mercy is extended to those who, like Lot, seek refuge in His word, even imperfectly. It is a testimony to the intrinsic justice of the Creator, who does not ignore evil, but offers a path to salvation. The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah challenges us to look within, to discern the hidden sins in our lives and the society we live in. It invites us to self-critique, to recognize pride, greed, and indifference that may corrode our souls and communities. The story of Sodom is not meant to terrify us, but to inspire. May the lesson of these lost cities guide us to seek the light of righteousness, to walk a path of holiness and justice, and to choose faith over perversion, a path that leads to life and salvation.